Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. Today I'm going to cover the UK supergroup Head, Hands, and Feet. And it's kind of remarkable in this day and age that they're not more known or more acclaimed just from the quality of their music, and then also the fact that Albert Lee, the guitarist, is astonishing. And of course, he ended up playing with Robert Plant amongst other projects. But he's definitely one of the UK's greatest guitar players. And the amount of talent assembled in Head, Hands, and Feet is pretty astounding. And fortunately, we have a fair amount of material from them. They started in 1969, and in fact, they um, evolved out of a band called Poet and the One Man Band. And just about everybody in Head, Hands, and Feet was in Poet and the One Man Band. They released one album, even here in the U.S., on Verve Forecast, and released in 1969. Of course, Verve Forecast, they closed that part of the Verve label, and one Poet and the One Man Band uh, more or less disbanded. But I think it's deceptive to say they disbanded because they essentially just morphed into Head, Hands, and Feet. And the band is Tony Colton on keyboards and vocals, Ray Smith, Mike O'Neill on keyboards, Albert Lee on guitar, Chaz Hodges, and Pete Gavin. And of course, Ray Smith and Chaz Hodges both play bass and guitar. And so a lot of talent, a lot of firepower in this band. And so after Poet and the One Man Band disintegrated in 1969, they quickly regrouped as Head, Hands, and Feet. And they recorded an album in 1970 called Home from Home that pretty much picks up where Poet and the One Man Band left off. And it's of its era. It has a lot of the qualities that you would expect from a band from 1969. Although they were already involved in kind of American roots music and had some country injections, and so that did make them a little more interesting. But all the qualities you find in Poet and the One Man Band and that first Head, Hands, and Feet album really get refined as they move forward. So the Home from Home album was unreleased and got shelved in 1970 and was finally released in 1996. But then they came out with their debut album in 1971 called Head, Hands, and Feet. And it's kind of odd that a UK band in the UK it was released on Island, in the US it was released on Capitol, but in the UK it was released as a one album set, and in the US it was released as a double album set. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but great album. The fact that there's two albums worth of material is pretty stunning, and a really interesting mix. I mean, they start off with "I'm in Need of Your Help," and it has all the classic elements of Head, Hands, and Feet. And but by the time they get to the third and fourth track, um, there's these lush Tony Colton ballads. Look at the world, it's changing. You because you know me, and they're gorgeous. Tony Colton has a beautiful voice. He's a great keyboard player, and there's great harmony vocals, and just very lush arrangements. But to have this country rock, and definitely on the rock side of country rock, and then they mix in these lush Tony Colton ballads, is really an interesting mix. A little bit of an identity crisis, but it works just because they're so well done. The melodies are beautiful, and Tony Colton just has an astonishingly beautiful voice, and so I don't blame them. But then they get into stuff like Green Liquor and Country Boy, and Pete might spook the horses and Hang Me Dang Me. You get into some serious country rock, definitely on the rock side of things. Then by 1972, they released Tracks, and they did a U.S. tour for that record, and it's really their masterpiece. It just really uh, has all their elements, and it's finely honed. And the the song lineup is great. Everything is perfect about it. They keep the lush ballads to a minimum, although there's a great ballad by Albert Lee called Harlequin that's just gorgeous. And they had sort of a big hit off of this Hot Property, and they used to actually play that song on the radio, and that's how I heard him. So I was kind of on the lookout for the album anyway, And then, like so many other things, all of a sudden it popped up in cutouts. So it came out in 1972, but already by 1973, you could find it in cutouts. And in fact, I found the first album cutouts around that same time. And then in 1973, they released their final album. They actually broke up in 72 after recording this album, and it was released in 1973 called Old Soldiers Never Die. And by that time, they'd switched to the Atco label, the other two albums on Capitol and Island in the U.S. And that the final album, Old Soldiers, really has an identity crisis. There's some great uh, roots rock material on it, but there's a lot of the lush Tony Colton ballads, including strings and really big productions. But his beautiful voice, and we're also very blessed that we actually have a fair amount of material from them. If you include the Poet and One Man Band album, we essentially have 5 albums of Head, Hands, and Feet material. And interestingly enough, too, they also are a big part of the backing band on Jerry Lee Lewis's London Sessions album released in the early 70s. And so they're definitely a band that can really handle everything. And then apparently they're the backup band on a still unreleased album by Carl Wayne, the former singer from The Move. He recorded an album in 1970, and they were the backing band. So they're definitely respected amongst all the musicians in the UK. And I'm pretty sure it's the same Tony Colton that produced the second Taste album on the boards. So he was also quite a producer. But as far as their music and their records, if you love the band, the American group, the band, Head, Hands, and Feet are for you. They definitely remind me of a UK version of the band. They have multiple singers, all top of the line players. Pete Gavin is a great, great drummer. And of course, Albert Lee. A lot of people have heard his work since, but he's quite a picker. And to have that many great vocalists in one band, I think there's three or four of them, maybe even 5 of them that all sing. And the material is generally pretty good. Um, for that double album, the first album, and also pretty wild that they would put it out in the U.S. as a double album, as their debut album. They really obviously had a lot of belief in the band. And around that time, they actually ended up opening for a lot of big bands, including Deep Purple, Humble Pie, and Grand Funk. And so, kind of a mismatch. It's hard for me to imagine that fans of those bands would respond that well to Head, Hands, and Feet, but they were so consummate a band, and the playing was so great that they might have gone over pretty well. Um, I would say out of their albums, Old Soldiers Never Die, the final one is probably the weakest one, although just having it be the last album by a band this good, it's definitely worth having. And as always, I'll put the links for all this stuff below. The other thing we're blessed with is there's a lot of great live material out there. There's a couple great bootlegs out there, BBC shows and the like, and there's a whole bunch of appearances that were filmed on French TV in 1972. There's some Beat Club stuff. So there's a lot of ways to see just how great they were. And the fact is, they were so consummate. They obviously pulled off this stuff effortlessly live. And so I'll post all the live clips below as well. So if you really get into the band, make sure to check those out, because it really adds to the experience with them to actually see them do it. But between the quality of the material, the quality of the vocalists, the quality of the writing, the quality of the playing, you really couldn't do much better if you like UK rock laced with Americana and country. And there was a lot of English bands that kind of mined that territory, like Bronco, and they did a good job in the UK when they were really focused on it. And I think Head, Hands, and Feet are definitely the giant amongst those bands. Just totally great. I think the fact that they're sort of a countrified rock band that's really definitely on the rock spectrum really adds to how great they are. And then the variety, they really just have a broad palette of what they do within the context of their format. And so Highly recommend them if you've never heard them. And the way I described them sounds interesting. Check out the links below and find out about Head, Hands, and Feet. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.